When we read today's passage from Deuteronomy, it's easy to get the following takeaway. Follow the rules, and you'll be okay. You'll live and prosper. You'll prove yourselves wise and intelligent. Everyone will think highly of you. Everything will be fine. Sounds like a simple enough formula. But what rules are we supposed to follow? We Christians don't follow the law of Moses to the letter. So what's the standard? Is it the 10 Commandments, the great commandment to love God and neighbor, the Great Commission to preach the gospel to the ends of the earth and to care for those who are vulnerable and in need, Sermon on the Mount, Catholic social teaching? At least ideally, I think the answer is probably all of the above. But when we look at Jesus' example in today's gospel reading, it seems clear that Jesus isn't quite the perfectly obedient rule follower that many of us think we need to be in order to be good Christians. Jesus scandalized plenty of rule-following Pharisees and scribes because he understood rules differently than they did. He was more interested in what's inside a person than he was whether someone exactly conformed to some external standard of behavior. He cared more about a clean heart than clean hands. He cared more about God's law than mere human precepts. But Jesus wasn't a Gnostic. He didn't think that it was only what's inside that matters, and that how you act in the world has no importance or consequence. Unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, arrogance, folly, these are concrete actions in the world that have real and dire consequences for others and for the creation. It matters what's in our hearts, and it matters what we do. Our hearts dictate our actions, and our actions and choices form and shape our hearts. As we hear in the second reading from the letter of James, we're supposed to be doers of the word, not just hearers. Today's the first Sunday in the 2024 season of creation, whose theme is to hope and act with creation. When we think about all the evil and defiling thoughts that Jesus called out in the gospel reading, I think it's becoming more and more clear that the consequences of greed, malice, arrogance, and other evils don't just harm the human community. They damage creation as well. As Pope Francis pointed out in his encyclical Laudato Si, and again more recently in his apostolic exhortation Laudate Deum, creation is groaning under the weight of human abuse. Pollution, resource extraction, soil erosion, climate change, species extinction, it is a long list of woes. The rest of creation itself, not just our fellow human beings, needs us to be doers of the word with purified hearts and right action. That is the true common good we hope and act for, the good of all creation. But I come back to the question, what rules do we follow? What word do we act on? And I'm going to suggest 3 possibilities. The first and simplest is what I think is the heart of the gospel, the law of love. A heart steeped in love is a heart that knows how to act for the good of the other. As St. Augustine once preached, love and do what you will. The second is Catholic moral tradition. We have 2,000 years worth of faithful and brilliant Catholics who've reflected deeply on what love requires in war, in economics, in interpersonal and social relationships as stewards of creation. The third is the book of nature itself. And to unpack that, I want to tell you a story. I used to own a farm. And while I tried to take good care of it for the first several years, because I was young, because I was impatient and ignorant and ambitious, I broke too many of nature's rules. I plowed and I tilled way too much. I plowed land that was too steep. And I came to learn that nature does have a set of rules, and they are generally non-negotiable. And when you break them, there are consequences. I caused a lot of erosion and other problems on the farm. And the only way that I began to help heal that damage, the damage that I'd caused and the damage that others had caused before me, was to slow down, to be patient, to start listening and paying attention to what the land needed, what it wanted, what it could and couldn't tolerate. I realized that if I was going to help this land thrive rather than just go on and ruining it, I'd have to become its student rather than fool myself into thinking I was its master. I would have to learn to play by its rules rather than expecting it to play by mine. Over time, I got gentler and much more careful in the way I worked. And the farm responded beautifully, with old wounds starting to heal and the land giving back generously. I share this story because although not many of us are farmers, we all have to learn how to relate to the rest of creation and become aware of its rules and follow its rules for the sake of its survival and ours, since Pope Francis reminds us everything is interconnected. And I just want to say, this is good news. It's not just some added moral burden. Nature's rules may be stern and unyielding in some ways, but nature is also a wonderful and patient teacher. It's been a source of deep joy and hope for me to apprentice myself to creation in its beauty and in its travail, and it can be for you too. The more you pay attention to creation, the more you realize that its laws aren't just out there for us to learn and discover, they're also written on our hearts. We are creatures of this earth. We're made to belong in this beautiful world. We're kin with all creatures, and we carry creation's wisdom in our deep instinctual memory as creatures. If we stop and listen to God's still soft voice in our hearts, we realize that we have what we need to act skillfully and lovingly for the sake of our fellow human travelers and for the sake of all God's world. For the next several weeks, Pope Francis has invited us on a journey of ecological conversion, where we let our hearts be opened to the wonder and the needs of creation and the invitation to belong more fully within it. This is the opportunity we've been given, a perfect gift from above, coming down from the Father of lights. May we receive it with joy and become true doers of the word.